the player that we're using. Nobody else has done this before, and that's why I feel like it answers this question that I had going back to 99 about how do you create a model that matches not just like the feeling of scarcity we had before Napster hit, but tries to mimic that process of falling in love with an artist and a piece of music. If you want to become a fan of somebody, that's the point where there's a bond that's created, and you start to understand that if I want to get more music from that person, I probably should do something for them.
That's Peter Harris, founder of Resonate. Resonate is a cooperatively owned music streaming service that's using next-level technology to put musicians in the beautiful human process of becoming a fan at the center of a new model for the music industry. In this episode, Peter's going to talk tech, music, business models, and he candidly discusses some really interesting challenges of tackling a big project on behalf of hundreds of thousands of musicians and fans. I think you're really going to dig this interview. Keep on listening.
2, 3, 4.
Hey everybody, how you doing? John Hammond here. You're listening to the third episode of Make Moves. So glad you could join us. Today on the show, we're featuring Peter Harris. He's a pretty interesting cat. He spent a lot of time in the tech world. He spent a bunch of time doing startup work. He also was an electronica producer for a lot of years under the moniker of Dr. Atomic. Through his experience, he realized that most of the current streaming media technology was not supporting musicians in a way that was particularly helpful, and he decided to put his love of technology and music and business smarts together, and he founded Resonate, which you'll hear more about in this interview. But the story of how this interview came together is actually kind of cool too. Not so long ago, I didn't know Peter. I was Googling around looking for information on distributed collaborative organizations and trying to figure out what blockchain technology was. And I sort of stumbled into the fact that someone in Berlin was working at the intersection of distributed collaborative organizations and blockchain technology and streaming music. So I did what any curious person would do. I reached out to the founder of a company that's thousands and thousands of miles away from me and asked if he would take a phone call. And I got lucky. Peter said yes. And we talked on the phone. I learned what he was up to. I realized someone has to interview this guy and make sure that his story gets heard because he's just doing really great work and it's going to benefit a lot of people. I'm really glad he came on the show. I'm glad that you're all going to get a chance to hear this interview. I'll check in with you about the halfway point to play a little bit of music. But until then, I'm going to turn off my microphone. I'm going to let you turn on your ears. Have a good time. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
John with Make Moves.
Hi, John. Make Moves.
I can't even complete this knock joke.
There is no joke.
Yeah, there's no joke. This is all real. You're Peter Harris, founder of Resonate. Yes, did I get the right number? There's no such thing as a wrong number when you call on Skype.
Sure, there is. You could have the wrong address and reach the wrong person if they accept your.
Well, but it sounds like I got you.
You did. I'm here.
Fantastic. So thanks for making some time. Where are you right now?
Berlin.
What time is it for you?
6:00 in the evening.
Yeah, it's about 9 a.m. for me in California. So thanks for spanning the distance. Thank you to Digital Technology for making this possible. And I'd love to ask you a couple of questions. You are the founder of Resonate. I am sort of curious. Can you give me the elevator pitch? What is Resonate?
I'll give you the pitch that happens outside the elevator before you hit the button, and that's if Spotify was a cooperative.
Okay.
Ding. Okay, so if we go in the elevator now, so you can sort of get the idea pretty quickly that fans, artists, the people that build it, all sharing in decisions and sharing in the profits. That's what it means to be a cooperative, and that's what we're building. But that's really just the starting point, because it's a lot more than just can you click a play button and listen to some music? We're going to go off in a lot of different directions that I honestly don't think anybody else is going to be able to touch, because they're really not dealing direct with artists or fans.
That seems to be sort of a pivotal piece of what you're doing in your organizing structure. I want to come back to that soon. I noticed, I mean, if you look on resonate.is, your main site, the first phrase that pops up is stream to own. Can you explain what that means to the audience?
Yeah, it was, basically I've been looking for a new model since 1999 when Napster hit, and it was very clear that business as usual was off the menu. And I tried everything out through the years, and I had kind of settled upon the idea last year of doing a music platform. And then I noticed that I was using this one particular service to repeatedly stream two albums over and over again. I was going through this 90s flashback phase, and I just kept listening to the same two albums. And I thought, wait a minute, this is stupid. I'm renting these albums from this band, and if I want to support the artist and actually own it, I have to go out and buy it, and then I'll have paid extra. And what's more, I realized that it was really horrible for them, because the proportion of money that I was giving Spotify was not going to the artist, because we all know what the royalty rates are. They're very public about what those numbers are. So it's like, this really doesn't make any sense. I'm streaming it, I'm renting it, but I'm not owning it. And that was pretty much the epiphany that led to stream to own, which I very quickly realized was a sliding scale. It starts off really cheap, and every time you listen to the same track, it doubles in the price. And so the key thing that people often say was like, oh, isn't that going to make me nervous that I'm going to have to watch the money being deducted from my account or something if I'm paying a little bit more every time I listen to the same song. And the thing is that if you listen to it 3 or 4 times, it's so cheap that it's like, it ends up being pennies. But it's when you hit 4, 5, 6 listens, and that's really the point at which whether you're a fan or not. If you're just listening to Spotify or SoundCloud or whatever just to have some background music, you're not really going to care if music repeats. You'll just listen to new stuff, and maybe you'll hear another song that'll come back around in your playlist again. But if you want to become a fan of somebody, that's the point where there's a bond that's created, and you start to understand that if I want to get more music from that person, I probably should do something for them.
Yeah.
They're already doing something for me. I should do something back. And that's where the model tries to create, which I think is the very first time that we've had this kind of phenomenon built into the architecture of the player that we're using. Nobody else has done this before. And that's why I feel like it answers this question that I had going back to 99 about how do you create a model that matches not just like the feeling of scarcity we had before Napster hit, but tries to mimic that process of falling in love with an artist and a piece of music.
Yeah. It's sort of it provides a justification to want to spend more than a half a penny on a stream. It acknowledges that you like something in I guess in a fair monetized way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in a way that the money's going directly to the artist. And that's the other really clever hack about this, is that our whole stream to own thing is based on a pay-as-you-go model. It's not monthly subscription. And the big problem with the monthly subscription models is that they force the streaming services to divvy up the money in a way that it just ends up being unfair to somebody. They just, and I don't think it's out of being evil or anything. It's just, I don't think there's any other way around it. And, you can go to SpotifyArtist.com and look at their formula. It's really complicated. And I think that they're having to reconcile the fact that they've got wildly different listening habits, based on the amount of time somebody uses it versus, and like what kind of music they're listening to. Mm-hmm. And it just ends up benefiting some at the expense of others. And so what our model does is it allows us to count and pay for every play.
Yeah, it sounds like a simple shift, but it seems to be one that makes a lot of sense.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Hey, you're welcome. That's why I'm calling you. I'm kind of curious. Make Moves is a show about people who have good ideas, but then they do something with them. It's the doing of good ideas that changes the world. Was there some tipping point where you just said, I've got to do this? I mean, how long did you think about it before you went from, I've got this idea to I'm doing something about it?
Well, in a way, I think it was 15 years, because this question of what should we do next was always in my mind. And it was from the double experience of building a lot of websites for artists, for musicians, and then also producing in my spare time and uploading to all the services. It's kind of like this day job and night hobby. And the day job, I had clients that were always kind of asking for advice about, well, what are we going to do? And we didn't always have the answer. And then I'd go home and do my hobby at night and produce a piece of electronica and then upload it to one of the various services that some of which have come and gone. And it was just always like lingering that the answer hadn't come. And so in some ways it was that percolation. Is that a word?
Yeah, I think so.
It was percolating for a really long time. But I think the shift in terms of like leading to action, there was a number of stages that happened it's really kind of a long story. But it did really connect with a lot of the developments that are happening around blockchain and decentralized technologies, and the birth of Ethereum, which is kind of blockchain 2.0, and all of that happened starting in the summer of 2014. Mm-hmm. And then it was kind of spring of 2015 where the ideas had started to really coalesce into, oh, okay, this is it. This is what I want to do. This is the direction forward. But not sure if that answered the question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like it was an idea that was always there, but you sort of saw a bunch of things coming together and you knew now it's possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that now it's possible shift was kind of over the course of a couple of months in early 2015. And then it was gradual. It was because there was a real exploratory phase where it was, I wondered, could this actually work? And I had to talk to a lot of people to see if they thought it could. And then that process has just grown and grown. And there's been some really great milestones, like doing the Platform Co-op conference in New York City last November was huge. There was one that was followed up in Berlin here, Most Wanted Music Conference here, that really kind of accelerated things as well with meeting certain people. And so various stages, I guess.
Yeah. I when I was getting prepared here to talk with you, I made some notes. I wrote down 5 things that really stuck out to me about Resonate. I was hoping I could just sort of say them out loud and, well, one, get sort of a validity check, see if I got anything wrong, and then ask you some questions behind those. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. So the first thing that I really, at least I thought was different about Resonate is it acknowledges that there's this human thing where fans want to connect with artists, and it assumes that they want to be sort of fair patrons. The second thing I thought of was that the platform, as you've been describing it and building it, is really built in an artist-centric way. It's not built around a spreadsheet. It's built around, I think, what artists need. The third thing that caught my eye was you have this distributed collaborative organization structure, which we'll probably have to circle back to, but it's very foreign, and it's not clear to me that any legal or tax entity really knows how to deal with it. I thought that was interesting. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they do know, or maybe they're inventing it as they go. You've already alluded to this, use of this cutting edge blockchain technology. But I thought it was interesting that you're using this technology to sort of erase some of the ugliness of the old music industry, that part that's not fair, which I thought was sort of neat. And then, beyond what you're doing in the music industry, you're messing with technology that, I'm sort of a newbie in this world of blockchain. I'm hoping you can explain some of that too as we go here, but it could fundamentally change the way that our world works.
Yeah.
And protecting and supporting musicians is sort of like a nice case study of, how can we use this technology? But it really seems like you might be on the bleeding edge of a shift in our world by doing this. So before I get any further, that's the 5 things that I had to just really think that's what caught me. Did I get any of that really wrong?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to ask you some questions here around, a little bit about your motivations and your thought process, and then I'm hoping we can dig into some actual technical questions. So 1999, and actually even in 2015 or 14, when you really started accelerating, the rest of the music industry was headed in some other direction. And I'm kind of wondering, what is it that made you think to go back to basics and include some of this human stuff, like connecting people for real and, taking care of the musicians?
Well, I think my mind is organized to look for patterns, and maybe that's why it took such a long time to get to this. That I had to. I kind of had to go through 2 things. One, I had to have my own personal experience with and frustration with trying to release stuff online and seeing what that process is like, and how difficult it is to do a lot of really basic things. And so that frustration built up over a long time. And it was also that I've had a lot of clients and friends that, hearing their stories over the years, some of them were like, I was helped them with their first website. And, like I could think of my friend J.B. Eckel, who's a guitar player, that he's got some pretty notable credits to in his repertoire. Like he was a guitar player with War for a while in the 90s, recorded a bunch of tracks with Santana on Santana's comeback albums. Ozo Motley's covered his stuff. And I'd hear stories like about how long it took for him to get paid for some of that work. It just could be years before he'd see a royalty check on something that, the labels and collection societies were obviously getting the money a lot sooner than they were putting it out. And so I think all of these stories of my own personal frustration and hearing stories like this from friends and clients was a big part of what went into it. But, there's another side of the whole thing, which is that, and this is where the cooperative model comes into play, was that I came to Berlin in 2012, at the end of 2012, and the intention coming here was to get a startup going. And we got some money from an angel investor, and my God, we had done so many VC pitches. I can't even count the amount of times I revised the business plan and our pitch deck for one scenario or another. And so I got really kind of exposed to the way that stuff works. And I was watching what was happening in the world and seeing how corrupted so many massive enterprises had become with this model that is kind of like it's just the way the internet's worked for the last 10 years, which is that somebody builds something that's really cool, solves a problem, lots of users jump in on it, and then this core team needs to expand in order to deal with the demand. And then at that stage, the money people show up, and the usual line is, don't worry about the business model, we'll figure that out later. Here's a couple of million to get started,
right,
or to ramp this up, and then that's followed by 50 million and sometimes even more before they start asking the question of like, well, how are we going to monetize this? And sometimes this process can go on years. And then, they're in the situation where they didn't have a business model to begin with, or they realize that the only place that they can make any money is by advertising or data mining the users. And so this combination of seeing the startup world from the inside and getting a project launched and funded and developed and released, to looking at all of these other cases, it really made me realize that if I'm going to do anything, it's got to be fundamentally different. And that's where the cooperative model comes into play. And I think I've gone really way off of where your question was.
No, I'll follow here. I am a little curious. Can you sort of unpack what the cooperative is? I mean, I've done a little reading on it, but what is this cooperative model?
Well, it's most people, when they hear the word cooperative, they'll think of like a grocery store in the neighborhood, or maybe they've heard of an agricultural co-op. They're certainly very common in lots of countries around the world. Heavy in agriculture. Credit unions are another great example where the banking institution is owned by the members. And it just basically boils down to one member, one share, one vote, and usually some form of profit distribution. Mm-hmm. So you get like democratic governance, and then you get to share in the money. And there's lots and lots of research about how businesses that shift to cooperative models, like small businesses can actually make more money and be more profitable for the members when they do so, because it puts the decision-making power back into the hands of the people that are affected by those decisions, right, versus being separated by someone who just owns the business. And so it was really obvious to me that was one of these fundamental problems that, I was having with all of the services and everyone else was having, is that you were just at their whim. If they changed the way the service worked, they, changed their terms and conditions, they, decided to go off in a different direction and pivot into a different service. We would have wasted all that time. And that's the thing. New music platform comes along, and you have to put time into it to develop it and build it up. And it's like, I've gone through this countless times, and I know so many others have too, that you invest all this time and then the company just changes their mind about something and you're kind of screwed. You've lost all of that time and energy invested in it. And well, the cooperative is the only business model that I've found that could sort of answer that problem. So that's why we chose that format.
And so these cooperatives, I mean, they have, and I guess Resonate has a charter behind it. It sort of says, this is how we're organizing. We're not going to stray too far from this model. So when you get in, this is what it's going to look like moving forward.
Yeah. Then there will be a process developed around the full participation of all the different communities that are affected by it. And so if there's, something comes up where we see, here's something that affects musicians, then we put up a vote to that community. Fans, maybe there's a fan specific issue that they need to vote on. They need to vote on, or there'll be topics that the whole community will need to address. And it's good. It's exciting that way too, because it means that we can put out an MVP and then we can start asking the community to tell us what they want. what's most important to them, and just make that kind of built into our development process.
Right. But again, you're asking the community that has skin in the game.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So you're asking, it sounds like the right community. I'm a little curious. So the first time I ever spoke with you, I think it was right after that cooperative conference in New York. At the time, if I remember correct, you were searching around trying to figure out some answers about how blockchain actually worked and how you could use it. And if I'm not mistaken, I think you're sort of the expert now as how blockchain's supposed to work in the music industry. I think you mentioned you were just at a conference giving a talk about it, a couple of days ago. So I wanted to congratulate you on being tenacious and finding the answers, or making up the answers, I guess. and I guess since now you're the expert, could you maybe just do us all a little favor and explain a little bit about blockchain, sort of the blockchain for dummies spiel?
I can really easily do that because I am kind of one when it comes to the topic. I don't. The real deep technical architecture of how all this stuff works it goes over my head. I never really progressed past being HTML and CSS when it comes to web development. I can build WordPress sites, but we've got some people on the team that could really answer the really deeper technical questions, but that would probably go over the heads of most people anyway. So the way that the simplest way to describe what blockchain is and why it's so revolutionary is that everybody knows what a website is. We use them every day. You're on a website now, having clicked the play button, listening to this podcast. And that website is most likely powered by a database. WordPress is the most common. And that database sits on a server in a specific room, in a specific building, in a specific city on Earth. We all know the hype about the cloud, and the cloud really isn't that much different. It's just they move the data into different cities so that it's closer to you based on where you are when you're accessing a web page, but it's still the same model. And it's very, very centralized. The blockchain, however, is a completely decentralized database. So the most common use of blockchain is in Bitcoin. And this decentralization feature, meaning that the whole database is shared among the people that are using it, is what makes or what allows Bitcoin to run without a bank. Mm-hmm. So you usually have to think about this for a moment. You think about, you go somewhere, you go into a shop, and you swipe a credit card. That transaction's going to a bank. The bank's saying, yes, he's got the money, and here I'm releasing the funds, and then it's going to get transferred on to the merchant's bank. And that's a centralized process, that exchange of money. But when you use Bitcoin to make purchases, you're dealing direct, and that transfer is happening direct with the other person. It's just going into this special type of decentralized distributed database that's protected through some incredibly advanced cryptography that allows you to make those personal connections and transactions.
So it removes the middleman.
It removes the middleman. And to go back to a comment you made before, I'm definitely not an expert on blockchains. I know quite a lot now about what's going on in the music business in regards to this, but nobody's an expert because it's happening so fast that it's almost impossible to keep up with the development. But through my own research, I did this. I was co-organizing with Petter Eriksson a week-long laboratory, creative lab at the Music Tech Fest here in Berlin that we had the last week of May. And we brought together lots of people from all across the industry to get in a room and kind of hash it out. And it was intense because just making the decision to co-organize, I wasn't the only one, but just making the decision to participate forced me to have to learn a whole lot about the issue. And then pretty much from the first half hour, I realized how little I actually knew. I thought that I had got a good overview of the problem, and then people started bashing it out in the room. We had about 25 to 30 people throughout the week, and it got really intense at times because we had people from very diverse backgrounds and diverse interests and perspectives, and so it got very intense at some moments. But I think we kind of were able to get a really good overview of what was going on worldwide when it comes to blockchain for the music development. And we've identified some really good steps moving forward.
What are some of these opportunities for the blockchain in the music industry? I mean, what problems are they solving, or what new things is it creating from your eyes? And really, I mean, maybe you're not the expert on the mechanics of the blockchain, but you're playing with it in a publicly visible way.
Yeah.
So I mean,
yeah.
How is that?
Well, it kind of falls into three categories, and pretty much everybody that's doing something around this would agree that it's around metadata, licensing, and payments. And so each of those categories is pretty much a mess in terms of the way the music industry works. The metadata problem is that you have all these different data silos of the labels, the collection societies, digital service providers, publishers. Everybody's got their own data set as to who made this piece of music and who has the rights to it. Who recorded it, who is the engineer, who's the songwriter, who are the performers. Often you go back into the history of 20th century music, and each of these different silos, they have a different set of information. So like if you're a music supervisor, you want to put a piece of music into a TV show or a film, and it can be an exhaustive process trying to find out who has the authority to say yes or no and to find out the price. And so the idea that there could be a decentralized database that stores all that information and it's publicly available, and it's a true account of the ownership and rights and credits surrounding a piece of music. I mean, that's a pretty profound thing. It solves lots and lots of problems and can potentially erase some of the really ridiculously long periods of time it takes to get musicians paid for how their music is used.
Because we all know that they have so much money all the time that they can wait 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because musicians are a unique species on Earth, and that they don't need food and water and sleep and clothing and transportation. Yeah. They're pretty unique in that regard, in addition to being able to write cool songs. So,
the musicians. So all of this stuff's coming together, and you're figuring out how to use it, at least in Resonate. And it sounds like there's a big community out there also that's thinking about it. Do you collaborate a lot with people and pulling this together? Are there big opportunities that you see are really just happening and you're capitalizing, or is it something that you're all dreaming up together?
Well, there's lots of different things going on in different places. And so I am really connected with Imogen Heap's Mycelia Network or Foundation, which is based out of London. And I'm aware of what's going on in the States. There's a couple of big initiatives happening there. One is run by Benji Rogers, the CEO of Pledge Music, and his thing's called .blockchain. And there is the Open Music Initiative, which is being run out of Berkeley Music, and they're going to be making an announcement imminently. I think it's supposed to come out on June 8th about who their partners are in their project, and they're doing something. And then there's a lot of very small projects that I don't think are going to go far for various reasons, but because they're kind of like doing niche, they're using blockchain in really niche ways. They're not really trying to solve problems on a meta level, but the challenge with it, the more that you dive into it, the more difficult it becomes, because you start running into problems about how does the initial record of the production of a piece of music get entered into the blockchain? What happens if somebody makes a mistake and you've got to go back and edit it, because that's kind of like sort of contrary to the way that technology works. It's an unwritable database, meaning you can't go back and change it. If I want to go make an edit on a WordPress site, I can just log in and make a change, and WordPress may store a revision of that. But if I go directly into the MySQL database and make a change on the server, no one would know that I made an edit and changed red to blue. But with blockchains, it's fixed. The first time you enter it, that doesn't change. It's always available and always can be seen. And so this creates a whole lot of problems. Then you run into problems of like identity and authorship, in terms of, you don't want to create a system where somebody else could upload a track and say they're the author of it. Mm-hmm. There's this great story that came out about this, I think it was a teenager from Austria who called himself Cal the producer and had started editing pages on Wikipedia saying that he was like a co-producer on a ton of music. Of recent releases, like in the last 5 years. And because the media was going to Wikipedia as if it was the definitive source of truth, which in many cases was with some issues, it's definitely not. The labels weren't paying any attention to it. The artists weren't paying any attention to it. And so they started quoting this information, and this dude Cal got to become quite a legend, because he worked on a lot of stuff. He was really prolific, but nobody really could seem to know who he was, which was a bit of a mystery. And then somebody dug into it and found out. But that's a great example of, if you've got somebody misrepresenting their credits on a piece of music, you could run into a lot of problems, especially if a system gets built where money is distributed and it goes in the wrong place and it can't be retrieved. So there's some really, really fundamental problems there that it's going to take time to solve. But I think the best way moving forward is that people just are going to start building things and prototyping and testing. And one of the great suggestions that came out of our lab was to try to go for as much of a modular approach as possible, so that we don't get bogged down trying to solve all the problems, because if you do, it just won't ever get built.
For your listening pleasure, we're hearing a little sample of a song called Luminescence by Dr. Atomic, aka Peter Harris. If you'd like to get a whole lot more electronica music for free, you can swing over to dratomic.net and download it, no charge. Or you can swing by this show's website, www.makemoveswithjohn.com, and I'll provide a link so you can get there. For now, just relax and enjoy some music. You are innovating with technology, some type of organizational business structure, and you're also, I don't know if innovating is the word, maybe you're referring back to an older time, but sort of you're reintroducing a value system where the musicians matter, at least in relationship to their work. Do you feel an obligation obligation to do this? I mean, all of these, well, I mean, history has shown that all of these independently are profitable things that you could do. But you're putting them all together, and it seems like it's maybe a little bit bigger than you.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And, it's funny you pick the word obligation. I don't know if I would have come to that on my own. It's, hearing someone else say it, it really resonates with me because at this point I do feel obligated to move this thing forward. And, I feel very privileged as well that, all of this kind of came to me. And then in some ways, I'm humbled by it every single day. One of our lead designers is this guy from Paris. His name's Timothy, and got to meet him. We've been collaborating online for months, and he got to meet him in Berlin last week. And he was over at the house, and he set down he pulled out his phone to check something, and I noticed it was a Fairphone. And I was like, that was kind of like the moment I was like, yeah, this guy gets hired. Like, if we raise money, I'm he's first in line, cause it just revealed where his intention was. And we later talked about it, and he said, yeah, when I saw about the Fairphone, I just knew this was something that had to be. And he had the same reaction to Resonate. And it gives me chills, hearing things like this, because it does feel like the whole thing is much larger than me, and it's something that's has to happen.
It's a big goal what you're working on here. I mean, I'm wondering maybe outside of some obligation that you're sort of recognizing now, but what gave you the courage to even try this? Because it's big.
Yeah. This is probably one of those questions that I won't really be able to answer until I'm in my 80s or something, and I'm actually able to look back. But, I was really highly suspicious of myself for quite a long time, that I had delusions of grandeur, because I had always felt that I was going to do something big for as long as I can remember. And I constantly questioned that motivation, and had to kind of face it and re-examine it and question myself so many thousands of times as various things happened in my life, because it didn't make sense. It was just like, it never left me. And more than a few occasions where I thought I was crazy. I thought, well, why would I feel this way if it's not true? And it was, and now that this is all coming together, it's all starting to make sense. That for whatever reason, I had that sensation that I was going to do something like this. It's just kind of what's in front of me. I don't know how to.
Okay.
I kind of think I'll sort of lose my train of thought, because it's still so much of a mystery that it's kind of happened. But as I found myself having in a conversation last week at the Music Tech Fest with somebody there, I think it's happened to me because I've tried so much in my life and have been met with such intense failure over and over and over again, that I've kind of turned into a bit of an incorruptible person, in that as everything that I tried previous to this failed, I had to look at really what my motivations were. and deeply examine my own psychology about why I was doing something. And a lot of times I found that I was doing it for ego gratification. And that process of trying something and failing, and there's quite a lot of it that if Resonate is actually successful, there's quite a lot of it, and I'm sure will surface that I would be very much happy if it stayed buried. Some of it literally buried underneath a house in South Pasadena. That but it's those failures that force me to go through that self-examination and really look at what motivates people and what motivates myself, and eventually learn that nothing outside was ever going to make me happy. That no amount of success and applause and privilege was ever going to make me feel any different about myself. And I think that this is, this has been echoed by countless, celebrities and famous people that just have gone through this heartbreaking experience of thinking that they were going to have arrived at some point when they were successful and that they would know they were okay, and being incredibly discouraged to find out that that's not the case. Outside success doesn't change you at all. And I think that may be why I've been kind of led to do this, is that I'm not going to be corrupted by that process. And I'm not doing it. I'm not doing this because I need it. I'm doing it because there are a couple 100,000, maybe more, musicians out there that they're the ones that need it. And ultimately the fans need it too. They just don't know it.
Yeah.
Or maybe they don't, maybe they do know it, but it hasn't coalesced or manifested in front of them in a way that they can say, oh, that's it. That's what I've been missing. But the more musicians I talk to, and then independent labels, they're like, that's the feedback that we get, is that this is what's needed. This is the model. God, I hope that doesn't sound so totally grandiose.
No.
Words that will bite me on the ass in 10 years. By Peter Harris.
This raises a little curiosity for me. You have a kid, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have kids too. So if anyone in the audience has kids, this is the one moment where I'm going to use a bad word, and I want to give everyone fair warning so they can turn down the volume for 30 seconds. In your process on this journey, have you had any of those fuck this moments, or fuck you, I'm doing this anyway, you can't stop me? Has that come up yet? Or this situation is so screwed up, I'm just not going to sit in it anymore. I mean, it sounds like that's what you're saying, but it also sounds like you're saying it about it's not even just your situation. It's a big situation for hundreds of thousands of musicians.
Yeah. I mean, there are some moments where, I hear stories about what's going on with the other streaming services, and it sounds like an incredibly daunting task. Or maybe there's a moment where, I read a story recently about Apple, the Apple Music streaming app, erasing people's hard drives, not hard drives, but their music libraries. Converting the music library on their hard drive and putting it in the cloud, and you're wondering who in their right mind thought this was a good idea. And there's definitely some motivation that comes out of those moments of hell yes, I'm going to build this.
Yeah.
But and sometimes it's we got a comment came back from a musician that saw our pricing, or rather our royalties calculator that showed what they would make with us versus somebody else. And the comment back was wow, the difference in money here is breathing. It means I can take my wife out for dinner once in a while and not have to worry about it. And it was just like, that was powerful, to hear that someone thought their life could be impacted by this. And so that stuff definitely motivates me. It kind of over motivates me. I think I need to relax more.
I don't know. Maybe you shouldn't relax. You seem to be making a lot of progress.
Yeah, but it can be incredibly exhausting at times because it's hard to shut off. It's Sunday night, and I can't wait to do a podcast interview because I want the 12 people that are going to listen to your show to hear about this because I'm excited.
It sounds like you are on.
I think it's going to millions of people will be listening to Make Moves with John Hammond.
We'll see. Seeing as I barely know what I'm doing, 12 would be good. I wanted to sort of ask just a few more questions, and then I want to leave a little space for you at the end to tell me things that I did.
Wants to talk even more than I've already talked. God. Yeah. Okay.
On your path, because you're definitely on a path now. I know a lot of times diversions come up. You're moving in a direction and you know what you're pointed at, and then diversions come up. And I was wondering, what's the biggest opportunity you had to turn away?
Opportunity that came up that I had to turn away.
Yeah, to stay on the path.
Well, I could be making money. I don't know if that's really been a factor so much. I could have concentrated more time on my web development business and could be a lot more financially stable. My partner would sure appreciate that. So there haven't been any, prizes that have taunted me to steer me away from this at all. I'm more on the opposite, that there were definitely some moments where I just thought that I was absolutely crazy for trying to pursue this and thought that it was going to be impossible because I knew it was going to require being full time and not making a dime until we got funded, and that could take a while. And fortunately, my lady's been really, really supportive. But we are on a time frame. I've got a cutoff date. I haven't told anybody else what it is, but there is a cutoff date from which I need to really get back to work. So there were some moments that, and I owe it to her too, because she was really the one, Susanna. She really said, "The hell you're dropping this, so we'll make it work. Get back to work on it."
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about support networks. There's a lot of creative people and go-getters out there, but especially when they pick big projects like the one you're working on, one where it seems like Mount Everest or something. These support networks, they never get famous. They always sort of stay invisible, but I don't get the feeling that anyone could do the work without them.
Oh, there's no, yeah. It would be impossible for me to be talking to you right now if I wasn't being supported by all the people that are involved on this project. I would start it off with Susanna Stauk, my fiance, and co-collaborator. I wouldn't be talking to if she hadn't pushed me to keep going. Had some amazing people that have shown up. Shane Morris has also gone full time without pay. Ian Warner doing design. Timothy Googly. I'm sorry, Tim. I still don't know how to pronounce your last name. It's French. Maria, Damien's, Kaio, Sherry, Victor, Cefu. I've got a lot of folks that are there, really directly involved with helping get this thing going. Andrew McLeod, our co-op advisor, Stefan Holly at the Fraunhofer Institute, that's been incredible, connecting me to various people, and yeah, there's without this, it wouldn't exist, and we need more. So if you know how to code.
I only wish I knew how to code. I was actually talking with my kid the other day, and, we were talking about college and, what's the right investment to make in your life. And I sort of realized you can probably learn to code in 6 weeks online and go get a job now. And it costs a whole lot less than college.
And the technology is going to be way more up to date than anything you're going to get in a college curriculum. So if you are a young person, learn how to code and do it on your own. Don't go to school for it. It's a waste of time.
And if you do it soon, you can help Peter.
Absolutely.
So I think it's getting time for me to wrap up my questions because I realize it's getting late your time zone. It sounds like you balance a lot of risk. You have a family. There's a million things going on all the time around you. At least it sounds like that. My last thought is, with all of this going on, I don't know about you. I try to control everything that I can, but sometimes I can't control it anymore. There's so many things that are out of my reach. Have you had to just surrender to anything? And what has come out of that, if you have?
I would say that's happening every 5 minutes. And there was definitely a big shift that happened. I kind of think it happened when I was leaving the mycelia event. I'll never forget like the street in London and Shoreditch and like the light that, it was just exactly this, I think it was even like a golden hour, as they say in the film business. And I had this feeling of energy just kind of wash over me that the only thing that was really stopping the project from going forward was my own fear. And that if I really surrendered and I let go of being afraid of how it was going to work, that things would just take care of itself. And I don't know, it feels like that got really integrated after that experience in that moment. Because what I've done since then is that, constantly putting out feelers and requests for help and sending out emails to labels and other people that you want to get involved. And I think that the key to this for me, keeping my own sanity and also just for the success of this, is that every little time I take an action like that, I just let it go. And I just kind of erase it from my mind and I forget about it. And like a great example of this was I met this journalist at the Republica conference about a month ago here in Berlin, and she's incredibly connected, and it would be like it'd be amazing if she did a story on us. And I talked to her for I don't know, at least an hour, maybe more. And we went deep into a whole lot of stuff. And, I can stand there in that moment and be holding on to my ego and hoping like that she'll do a story about us and that's going to be such a big help and blah, blah, blah. But I have no control over this person. I don't know what she's going to do. I don't know if she's going to find this interesting enough to write a story about it. And so if I hold on, it's going to make me crazy and nervous, and that's going to affect the next interaction that I have with somebody else. And so I guess I learned at a certain point that if this thing is meant to be, it's going to happen because people believe in it, and not because I'm holding on to thinking that any little interaction's got to be successful, otherwise it won't work. So I just let go of everything that happens. I hope for the best, and then I just let it go and move on to the next thing.
I'm glad that I'm recording this because I'm going to play that back for motivational thinking as I try and grow some of my own projects.
There's also, there's another practical side to it, which is that holy shit, we can't even keep track of the amount of information that's hitting us on a day-to-day basis is just, it's ridiculous. And so, how, you gotta let go. You really gotta let go of a lot. Otherwise you're in trouble. It's too much to keep track of.
Yeah. I feel that. I'm working with my daughter on that right now. You have to put the phone down sometimes because there's an endless stream of information that can come in. There's a million projects to do for school. And life doesn't, I'm a grown up now and I have even more devices and tools and things to do. And I think people are wise to learn how to sort of throttle that down a little bit, because if you don't do it or I don't do it, the world's certainly not going to stop dumping information into our space.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, can I talk with you offline after we hang up here? And maybe I'd like to assemble some resources about blockchain and Resonate and cooperatives. Can you help me put some of those links together for the audience, for those that are curious and want to click away and get more of that information that we just said was going to overwhelm them?
Sure.
Yeah. Great. And before I thank you, I wanted to say, we just spoke for about 58 minutes. What did I not ask? What are the things that you feel like just need to be talked about?
Give me money. Yeah, that's it. We just need money.
So, really, at this point,
really, yeah. I know, and even that though. I make a joke out of it, but I even know the money's going to be there when it is really absolutely necessary. So I'm not even really that worried about it. But yeah, it's really, really a challenge to do anything outside the box of the whole VC model, because it's just incredibly time consuming to build platforms. People go to websites and they click around and they do stuff and they just have absolutely no idea the monstrous amount of time that it takes to get to put something up on a screen that functions and makes sense to people when they use it. And so I'm really, really grateful that a lot of the people I mentioned are either full-time or part-time with this, and they're hoping that they're going to make some money in the long term, but they're not motivated by that. But there does come a point when we're going to need to be really super focused on development, and we'll do a crowdfunding campaign and all that. But if there's anybody that's got money out there that wants to invest in a different model for the music industry, please come talk to us.
I should have thought to ask about this, but in the past we've had a few conversations, and you do have a crowdfunding idea for raising some money. Some of this is nonprofit, some of it is.
No, it's all for profit.
I thought some of the software was maybe going to be developed. Yeah. What is that called? What's that foundation that does the software development, or that you?
I think it's a Software Freedom Conservancy or something like that, and they're designed to help software projects have nonprofit status, and the code we develop will be open source. So we'll eventually set up that kind of nonprofit to manage that side of it, and so that if somebody wants to do a tax deductible donation, that could go towards that. But as far as the business side, as a co-op, the aim is to make money.
Right.
Being a cooperative doesn't mean that you don't want to make money.
It just means you want to distribute it fairly. You
just want to share it with the people who did the work.
Yeah. You also mentioned something, I forget the exact term, some term of art, redeemable share, something or other.
That's the thing I heard through Lumio, and they've got a really great app for helping people make decisions online. And they did this because they're also a co-op. And it's a redeemable preference share, and it just allows investors to participate without getting ownership and decision-making power, which is usually what you get when you own stock. So it's kind of like having a share, but it doesn't come with all the trappings that come in corporations, and what makes corporations so corrupt. So it's sort of like acting like a loan, but it's not quite a loan.
I see.
And that's what we're going to use for people that have deeper pockets and can afford the risk.
Well, so people out there, if you're hearing this and you think it's you, contact Peter or contact me and I'll contact you to Peter. So we're about at the time that I said I would take out of your evening. I wanted to thank you so much for coming on this podcast. Make Moves is proud to have you. I look forward to keeping in touch over time. I'm actually hoping you'll remember me when this all works the right way.
John, there's no way in hell I'll be able to forget who you are. That's just an impossibility. You brought us our first label. I didn't know Rope-A-Dope. I mean, I'd heard of them, but I didn't know connection to Rope-A-Dope. And everyone, John Hammond made that happen, ladies and gentlemen.
Woohoo! Finally, I get some credit for being a decent guy. Honestly, I like to connect people that are trying to do good things. I'm actually hoping that a lot of the people that come on Make Moves will be, I'm hoping there will be reasons for you to connect with other guests. I think that would be sort of maybe a hidden value of a podcast, is that it's going to bring a lot of people together that are doing cutting edge, revolutionary things. And if you all know about each other, it might open up new opportunities. So
absolutely.
I hope you don't mind if I pass off your email address to people as time goes. And I'll be happy to connect you with anybody that I know.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Peter. I'm going to call you in a few moments and ask you for some resources that I can share with everybody. But for now, I'm going to sign off. Thanks, everybody, for listening along, and we'll see you in the next episode. All right, episode 3 wrapped up nice. Really big thanks to Peter Harris for coming on the show. Episode 4 is going to feature Charlie Hunter, the legendary, iconic musician. This guy is one of my musical heroes. Been listening to him for decades. Anyway, he's coming on the show. He's going to talk about his new album, Everybody Has a Plan Until They Get Punched in the Mouth. I think that's going to be a really sweet interview. Looking forward to seeing you guys in episode 4. Until then, go out there and make moves.